I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual.
起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬、一鞠躬、再鞠躬、三鞠躬，参加各位点传世一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated. So let's resume our discussion of Chapter 9. Let me do a quick recap on where we were previously and where we want to go for today's discussion. So here's Chapter 9, 11 lines. We began previously with the 3 different metaphors that Lao Tzu is using, which includes a cup in line 1, a blade in line 3, and a room that is full of gold and jade as the 3rd metaphor. So we talked about what they meant, what they taught us, and then we went into the point right below the first 3 metaphors, starting at line 7. That's talking about how wealth and position bring about arrogance, which will in turn bring about disasters. And that is where we were at last time. So as a reminder of our discussion last time, the graphic that we ended up with, the image we ended up with, was the one about wealthy children of the wealthy who have never been challenged with hardship in life or taught to be thoughtful. In other words, not taught about the Tao. The result, disasters. So these are super expensive, high-end sports cars that are involved in horrific accidents. This is probably the most dramatic and most graphic example that I can think of how wealth can lead to arrogance, which can in turn lead to disasters. So I think with that little recap, we are now ready to continue on into the last 3 lines of the chapter. So as you can see, the 3 lines are these. From line 9 to line 11, when achievement is completed, fame is attained, withdraw oneself. This is the Tao of heaven. So I want to start by focusing everyone's attention on line 9. We have 4 characters here. So literally the 4 characters, the first character is achievement, and then the second character is complete. Then we have a character that usually means name, but in this case, it's actually fame, like making a name for yourself, like a well-known name. That's the meaning. And then the last character is attained. So if you were to do a very straightforward transcription, a literal transcription of the original of these 4 characters, it would be achievement completed, comma, fame attained, which is just about the way that it was translated. So this translation itself is pretty literal. Now, just to point this out, there are versions of the Tao Te Ching where it's only the first character and the last character. So let me show you what that looks like. Some versions of the Tao Te Ching have an abbreviated version. These 2 characters. So knowing what those are, you can tell that this would be transcribed as achievements attained. Now, if some versions have just the 2 characters, how is it that I decided to go with the 4? Well, number 1, that's the way that I learned it. Number 2, that's how it is in all the Tao Te Ching commentaries from the Tao tradition. Number 3, the more complete 4-character version that you see here, it shows up in an old version of the Tao Te Ching from about 2200 years ago. So I need to tell you what this is. This is 和尚公. Looking at the spelling in English, you may think it's he shang gong, but it's actually 和尚公. He means river, shang, above, gong, that's like a duke. So the He Shang Gong version from about 2200 years ago, and then there's another one from about 1500 years ago. Obviously, the one from 2200 years ago predates the 1500-year version by 700 years or 7 centuries, and it's only a short time after the Tao Te Ching was supposedly written 2500 years ago. So 3 centuries time back in those days, this gives us a high degree of confidence that the original was meant to be the 4 characters. So that's a little bit of archaeology for you, just so you know that about the different versions of the Tao Te Ching. Now, here's the unifying theme about the 4 characters and the 2 characters. Whether you go with the 4 or the 2, the classical interpretation is exactly the same. It's the attainment of objectives, when achievement is completed, plus the associated fame. That is, the fame that comes with achieving some sort of objective, some kind of goal. So oftentimes I talk about how in the Tao, you definitely should be inspired to have a great goal. That great goal is perhaps a lifelong dream to accomplish something great, something that is greater than yourself, something that benefits others, benefits more than yourself. To have an objective like that, to have goals like that, is not contrary to the Tao. So oftentimes in the West, I see references, teachings, ideas, books, recordings, where people talk about how in the Tao, you're not supposed to want to do anything. That's actually not the Tao. If you think about how the Tao has been in Chinese society for so many centuries, for 2500 years, and when you encounter the Chinese people themselves, you see people who are very diligent in working towards a particular goal. They are acting in accordance to the Tao. So either way, whether it's the 4 characters or the 2 characters, the most important message for Western students of the Tao is that Lao Tzu does not advocate doing nothing. So some people may be taken by surprise by this and may say, but what about Wu Wei, the non-doing, the actionless action? And I'll say, well, it's actually a misnomer, it's actually a misconception, a misinterpretation to think that Wu Wei means passivity, indifference, doing nothing at all, letting everything be. That's only part of the Tao. So the Tao, in the Tao, it's quite okay to have a dream that you want to get closer to, a destination that you want to approach. So this particular line 9, is a good demonstration of that. It shows that Lao Tzu considers accomplishing objectives to be a good thing that is congruent with the Tao. So let me hold that up as a bullet item. These lines show Lao Tzu viewed accomplishing objectives and even becoming known, in other words, famous, as being not necessarily opposed to the Tao. So I say not necessarily, and that's because you can definitely accomplish an objective and becoming well known and do it in such a way as to be contrary to the Tao. So you can, for instance, accomplish something and then wanting to grab the spotlight, to flaunt your achievements, to make sure everybody knows about what you have done, and then you want to bask in everyone's praise, in everyone's attention. That will be completely contrary to the Tao. On the other hand, it is also possible to do whatever you need to do to get closer to your dream and even have the dream materialize into reality, but do it in such a way as to be completely in keeping with the Tao. So here's the bottom line. The Tao, the actual, true, real, authentic Tao is not in avoiding the achievement or doing nothing, but doing things the right way. So this will give rise to a reasonable question, and that is, what do you mean by the right way? How do I accomplish something, but do it in accordance with the Tao? Well, it so happens that in the previous chapter, chapter 8, we spoke of the 7 virtues of water. So the idea behind that particular teaching on the 7 virtues of water is exactly matching and integrated with this particular chapter. So basically it says you can accomplish great works just like water does, just like water has always accomplished great things. But you can do it like water. If you do it like water, then you will do it in a similar way that is very similar way to water, in that it's very Tao-like. It's very much in keeping with the Tao. So I think probably everyone needs a quick reminder of what the ways of the water happen to be. So these lines are drawn from the previous chapter, and then I have highlighted some characters to show you some key words to match the 7 virtues of water. So there's a line that says dwelling with the right location. That's a metaphor for humility. And this is telling us that whatever it is that you do it with humility. And then another key word, depth. Yet another one, kindness. You want to act out of kindness. Integrity. You want to maintain your integrity. Leadership in this context has to do with administering to everyone equally and fairly. That is how great leaders are born, that they're able to exercise that fairness across the board, no matter who people are. And there's nothing that will ruin leadership as much as when the leader shows favoritism, perhaps nepotism. That is, treating some people differently than others, giving some people special treatment, causing people to feel, gee, they're fair. When that happens, morale will hit a low point. Moving on, there's about the effectiveness of water. As I mentioned previously, drip, drip of water in time going through solid rock. Water can be extremely effective, and then moving with great timing, that is, not too soon. To further help everyone translate the 7 virtues of water, you restate the 7 points, just to kind of drive home the point. Number 1, but without arrogance. Some of the great examples that we've had, people, great leaders who are very confident, but they can lead without getting full of themselves, without becoming arrogant. 2, go in depth. Why? Why go in depth? Because shallowness is for dabblers. Dabblers who are just sampling a little bit. It looks like my audio is breaking up a bit. Let's proceed. So what is the right way to achieve? We have confidence without the arrogance. We have in-depth without being shallow. So how about number 3? Well, let your actions
spring from the heart of compassion. That is, if an action that you want to take is actually unkind, it is time to reconsider. So let your actions and your words represent the compassion that is within. Number 4, earn and keep everyone's trust. Never compromise your integrity. So I want to highlight the word earn here because when people demand trust, oftentimes they forget that trust is not demanded, just like respect, it is earned. It is earned in the course of time when you have proven to yourself and to everyone else that you are deserving of trust or respect. Never compromise your integrity. And I mean specifically that you are holding on to your integrity even when it is not easy or when you know that nobody else will ever know if you breach your integrity. So more on that later. Number 5, lead, administer, and treat everyone with equality and fairness. So great administration is about this. Great administration is about being able to treat everyone the same, no matter who they are. From the powerful to the powerless, from the high to the low, everyone has that same essential equality, same humanity in them that is deserving of your respect as well. Number 6, be more effective through flexibility and versatility. So as I was putting this together, I was struck by the connection between these different attributes of the correct action in accordance with the Tao. Specifically, I want to provide an example that links number 6 with number 1. So let me do that in just a moment. For now, we are talking about the 7 virtues of water. So let me finish that up with number 7. Act when the moment is just right. So not too soon, not too late. How do you know when the moment is just right? Well, the only way to know is by experience and by perception. So as you perceive and observe other people doing things, you will also begin to sense the natural timing and rhythm associated with a particular activity in a particular setting, in a particular circumstance. So once you get in tune with that, it becomes easier and easier to also time your actions in accordance with a natural rhythm. So now, back to flexibility and versatility. There's a story that some modern-day Tao masters like to tell, and I know that sometimes in the Sunday sermons at church, it also makes an appearance. It's a story about how there was a truck, carrying a lot of merchandise that is trying to get from one place to another, from one city to another city, making a delivery. Now, the roads, the highways that are taken by this particular truck, there are many bridges, overpass, underpass, etc. So in one of the places where the truck is about to go below a bridge, this bridge overhead, there is a sign that says low overhead, and then with a measurement right next to it, and that measurement happens to be pretty much the height of the truck. So edging closer to the bridge, the truck driver finds that the top of the truck is just a couple of inches more than would safely pass underneath the bridge. So what to do. This becomes a big dilemma. The truck driver has a deadline to meet and doesn't know any other way of getting to the destination city. So this has attracted a crowd. Everyone is coming up with suggestions. For instance, take out all the merchandise from the truck and then disassemble that part of the truck to allow it to pass through and then put everything back. So everyone is arguing back and forth about how to do this and whether or not this can be done in a timely manner. And the story goes, a little girl chimes in and says, just let the air out of the tires. So by letting the air out of the tires, not entirely, but just enough to lower the truck by the couple of crucial inches, that is essential for the truck to pass underneath. So they did this, and they let the air out, and then they drove the truck slowly under the bridge until it was all the way past, and then they made it to the nearby gas station where they're able to reinflate the tires so the truck can continue on its way. So that is the story that talks about a couple of different things. One part of it that's associated with flexibility and versatility is that when you put your mind to it, when you examine all the different possible solutions, when you open up your mind, you see that there's more than one way to solve a problem. So a mental stability like water is similar to when water is flowing downhill. When it encounters an obstacle, it will find a way around the obstacle, whether it's to the left or to the right, above or under, water finds a way. So if people can have the same degree of versatility and flexibility, no matter what the obstacle happens to be, you will find a way around the problem. So that's number one. So in this case, instead of disassembling the truck, just let the air out of the truck's tires and then be able to pass underneath. So when this story shows up in a modern day sermon, the preacher will be sure to also say, what about letting the air out of you? So a tire that is full of air becomes a metaphor for someone who's literally full of hot air. Someone who's full of themselves, high opinion of themselves, and high on their own opinions on everybody else and everything else. So let out some of that air. Air comes out. Deflate the overinflated ego so that you can lower the truck that is you, so you can pass underneath an obstacle that otherwise you will, crash your head up against it and cause yourself some pain and some discomfort. So that is the story. It's the connection between, if you want to be flexible, you also have to be flexible with humility. And indeed, being humble allows you access to flexible solutions. That is because when you are arrogant, my way is the right way, my solution is the best solution, you become very dogmatic and you fail to see that there are other possibilities, so you lose the flexibility. That's how the story goes. Little did I suspect that the story is real. And not only that, it happens more than a few times in this particular country. Here you will see a truck whose top is just scraping the bottom of this particular bridge. So police shows up, people gathering together, and yeah, the solution indeed is to let the air out of the tires enough so that the truck can pass below. So I like to use this example. This is a frame that I captured from a newscast about this particular incident, and I like to use it to represent the flexible mindset, a mindset that's versatile and able to see beyond the obvious, see different solutions, so you can pick and choose the best one. Okay, let's move on. Okay, now we're on line 10. We just have a couple more lines before finishing off this particular chapter. And for convenience, I will also bring back in my clock here so we can observe the time as we do this. So let's talk about withdraw oneself. We got two characters here. What are they? What do they mean? Let me show everyone. So for the two characters, we've got the first character meaning body, which is another way to say self. So the body is the physical self. And then tui, the character meaning retreat. So self retreat, body retreat. So the meaning is exactly as translated, withdraw oneself. So I talked about the river before. This is where it shows up. The primary mental image taught for this concept is the river, which is what we also talked about in the previous chapter, Tao of Ching, chapter 8. So in that one, we spoke of the 7 virtues of water. So river represents a lot of that. So consider the river flowing across the landscape. It is crucial for all the living things along the river. It provides water to plants and animals alike. So it's doing tremendous work as it flows across the land because it is nurturing all living things. So one thing about the river is that once it has done its work, it moves on with no hesitation. It has no attachments. It doesn't stick around. It doesn't try to highlight what it has done. It doesn't wait for praise. It doesn't wait for compensation. It doesn't wait for rewards. It simply moves on. So to emulate this particular virtue of water / river, in a similar way, Tao cultivators who have done what they want to do will simply move on. No need to stick around for the accolades, for the praise, for the attaboy, for the pat on the back. Why bother with that? People know what you have done. People will appreciate it or not appreciate it. Either way, it's time to move on because there's other things that you need to do. So, last line of chapter 9. This is the Tao of heaven. So we got 3 characters. Literally, the first character is heaven, Tian, sky or heaven. Second character is the apostrophe S. And the last character is a character for Tao. And you will see it here as well in the upper right-hand corner. So, 天之道, heaven, apostrophe S, Tao, or heaven's Tao, heaven's way, the way of heaven. So another way to talk about this is that it's the way of nature, the way of heaven, the way of the Tao, that's the way of nature as well. So it's not just a river that is doing great things and then moving on when it's done. It's also every other aspect of nature. So the river is a good representative because it represents the way that all of nature works. So if you think about it, what happens when the wind comes in? So the windmills are rotating, spinning, doing work, milling something, milling grains. So the wind, or, in modern times, the wind comes in, rotating the windmills, perhaps generating power, generating electricity. We have all seen those wind farms. So once the wind has done that work, rotating the windmills, maybe generating power, it moves on. It continues on its way. It also does not stick around. It also does not wait for praise or compensation or rewards. It's got places to be. It's got more to do. And the same is true for the sun, the moon, the stars, indeed, every other aspect of nature. They just move on. So the sun comes in, provides warmth, provides light, and its work is done. It's moving on. It won't stick around. It'll actually be a disaster if the sun sticks around. So lastly, ultimately, our goal is to be more similar to this way of doing things, because it's literally the Tao of heaven. It's the way that heaven works. It's the way that all heavenly objects work. All heavenly bodies work this way. All aspects of nature work this way. So that's what we attempt to emulate in our lives. So this is the last line from chapter 9 of the Tao Te Ching. I think we're now ready for the paraphrase. So the purpose of the paraphrase is not an exact literal translation, character by character. It's sort of the opposite. The aim is to convey the meaning of the original as accurately as possible. Okay, so we're going to begin with three metaphors: the cup, the blade, the room full of treasures. So how can we convey that in the modern vernacular? Here's what I would like to offer to everybody. An important concept in the Tao is to do or have just enough and not cross over into excess. For instance, when we pour tea into a cup, we want to stop short of fullness and not overflow the cup. Similarly, it's a good idea to sharpen a blade, but if you keep sharpening past the point of usefulness, you end up with a blade that breaks easily. The same applies to a room full of treasures. We need material resources to use for worthwhile goals, but if we accumulate too much and use nothing, the Tao guarantees we won't hold on to the treasures for long. So there are several themes here that reiterate what we've been talking about. So remember, it's very much in accordance with the Tao to have worthwhile goals that you can pursue in a way that's congruent with the Tao, in accordance with the Tao, in alignment with the Tao. Okay, so what about the bottom section here? So wealth and position bring arrogance and lead disasters upon oneself. When achievement is completed, fame is attained, withdraw oneself. This is the Tao of heaven. So main ideas here: wealth, position, arrogance, disasters. And then the way of the Tao, the way of heaven, is to accomplish what you set out to accomplish, achieve the dream, the inspiration, the goal, the vision, and then withdraw. In other words, move on. That's the Tao of heaven. So let me paraphrase that in the following. As we observe people, we see that excessive wealth and fame lead to arrogance. Arrogance, in turn, leads to disasters. Nature is quite different. All aspects of nature accomplish great things every day. When they're done, they simply move on. We should learn from this. There are many things we can accomplish in life, but once we have done them, we should simply move on to. This is the Tao of heaven and the Tao for our lives. So there we go. That's chapter 9 of the Tao Te Ching. Now the summary. So thoughts inspired by Tao Te Ching 9. It's about action, the Tao of action. And I wanted to present this as a as a sort of an antidote to the idea that the Tao is all about wu wei or non-action. In reality, the Tao is about both taking action and not taking action. You've got to have both. You got to have the yin and yang symbol of being dynamic, one half of it, or being quiet, resting, accumulating energy, so you can be dynamic once again. And once you have expended the energy, you can rest once again. That's the real Tao. So now let's explore the Tao of Action. So first, let's contemplate one half of the complementary duality, the non-doing. So the problem with the misconception that I noted is that sometimes the impression is that non-action is all that the Tao is. And that's further reinforced by people who want to, for instance, talk about the benefits of meditation. So talk about slowing down, talk about letting go, detaching, but that's not what all that the Tao represents. So question number one, have you, like myself, seen or heard Tao-related teachings that advocate or preach the virtues of doing nothing? Furthermore, have you seen it represented as the Tao period without the other part, which is the action part? So I would like to challenge everyone to think what might be the cause of such a misconception. I can tell you that this conception exists virtually very little or not at all in Asia. And that's why everyone who comes from Asia that you encounter is very much likely to be a diligent person, someone who has a lot of plans and a lot of things that they have to do. So what might be the cause of such a misconception? I want to challenge everyone with that question. Now, contemplate the other half of the complementary duality, doing. Again, challenging everyone. If you heard what I talked about today, my challenge is, well, what is the actual Tao teaching on getting things done? And if you recall, that the actual authentic Tao teaching is not about just letting it go and then letting nature flow and that's it. The actual Tao is to observe water and do things like water, like the 7 virtues of water. And then last challenge, what is the connection between being humble and being flexible? For that, I would like to remind everyone about the visual imagery of the truck passing underneath the bridge with the air let out of its tires. So having the air being let out of the tires represents letting the hot air deflate your overinflated sense of ego. That represents humility. That represents a lack of arrogance. Flexibility is to be non-dogmatic about the possibility of different solutions in your life. So in the week that is ahead, should you encounter obstacles in your life, I would like to ask you to keep the truck in mind. That in that moment, encountering the obstacle, facing the obstacle, being in front of it, if you can take a moment, take a deep breath, and then let the hot air out of an overinflated sense of ego, perhaps you too will find a flexible solution that will get you past the obstacle so you can be merrily on your way and continue down the path of the Tao.
Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架深鞠躬，1鞠躬，再鞠躬，3鞠躬，持架各位顶传11鞠躬，斜翻1鞠躬。Well done, everybody. Thank you so much.